My name is Nathan Carter, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that family doesn't always mean loyalty. Growing up, I wasn't the golden child. That title belonged to my older brother, Eric. He was the football star, the business prodigy, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. Me? I was the quiet one, the kid who liked to read, to fix things, to stay out of trouble. I never demanded attention, and apparently, that made me invisible. I didn't think much of it until the day everything we feared as kids happened. Our dad passed away. It was sudden, and the family, as expected, turned into a courtroom of quiet tension. The will reading was scheduled 2 weeks after the funeral. We all gathered in the attorney's office, mahogany shelves, the smell of leather and old paper, the kind of place where power hangs in the air. I sat in the back, alone, while my brother and mom sat up front, whispering like they already knew what was coming. And maybe they did. I didn't expect much. My relationship with Dad had been distant. Not hostile, but definitely not close. Still, nothing prepared me for what I heard next. Eric Carter, sole inheritor of the Carter estate. That was it. One sentence. No mention of me, no acknowledgement. Just air. I didn't say a word. Everyone turned to look at me, waiting for a reaction. I gave them none. I nodded, thanked the lawyer, and walked out. It wasn't about the money. It was about what that sentence meant. That I was forgettable. That the years I spent taking care of things behind the scenes, fixing the leaking roof, checking on Mom when Eric was too busy, meant absolutely nothing. But instead of confronting them, I made a decision. I would walk away. Quietly. And let time do what it does best. Reveal character. Because I knew something they didn't. That house they all fought over, it wasn't paid off. It was a month later when I confirmed it. I did some digging, found the mortgage statement buried in public records. Turns out Dad had taken out a large second loan a few years back to cover some business losses. That house, the crown jewel of my family's pride, was still in debt. And no one knew it. Eric had inherited a ticking time bomb, and my mother, well, she was too busy planning vacations with money that didn't exist. Part of me felt smug, but a bigger part felt sad. I didn't want revenge. I wanted recognition. Since that wasn't going to come, I decided to do something else. I paid off the mortgage. It took nearly every penny I had saved. I drained my investment account, postponed a trip I had planned for years, and wired the final payment on a rainy Thursday morning. No one knew. I didn't do it for applause. I did it because that house carried more than money. It carried memories. Good ones. Ones I didn't want tainted by foreclosure or family shame. I waited 2 weeks, let the payment clear, and then I did something they'd never expect. I took the deed, printed a copy, and mailed it to them. No note, no return address, just a plain envelope with a title that read, "Paid in full." The call came 3 days later. My mother's voice was trembling. "Nathan, was this you?" I didn't answer right away. I could hear the emotion in her voice. Shock, confusion, maybe even guilt. "Why would you do that?" she asked. I replied softly, "Because someone had to." Silence, then a whispered, "Thank you." That was all I needed. I hung up. No need for a speech, no need for validation, just that one moment of acknowledgement. For the first time, she sounded like she saw me. Not the spare son, not the backup, just Nathan. Eric didn't call, not that week, not that month. He sent a text 2 months later. "Did you really do that?" I left it on read. It wasn't bitterness, it was peace. There's a kind of closure that comes when you give without expecting. When you prove, silently, that you were never the weak one, just the quiet one. And honestly, that text said more than a phone call ever could. It meant he knew. He knew what I did, and he knew what it meant. Word spread slowly. A cousin called me and said, "You're kind of a legend right now." I laughed. A legend? For doing the right thing? Funny how that works. The family started treating me differently at gatherings. Aunts who used to forget my name suddenly remembered. Uncles who mocked my job asked for advice. I didn't let it get to my head. I stayed the same, but inside I felt taller. Not because they finally saw me, but because I saw myself. There was one moment that hit me the hardest. I visited Dad's grave on his birthday. Just me, a cup of his favorite black coffee, and the sound of leaves rustling. I stood there for a while, thinking about everything, about what he saw in Eric, about what he didn't see in me, and for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I felt grateful, because maybe, if he hadn't left me out of that will, I never would have found this part of myself, the part that doesn't need applause to act, that just does what's right, even when no one's watching. Looking back now, I don't regret a thing. Not the money, not the silence, not even the hurt. It all shaped something solid inside me, a kind of quiet strength, the kind that doesn't need revenge because it already won. So if you're ever made to feel invisible, if you're ever cut out, left behind, or told you don't matter, remember this. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to write your name into the story without ever saying a word. I remember sitting alone a week after mailing the deed, drinking lukewarm coffee at my favorite diner downtown. The waitress, Marcy, asked how I was doing. I just smiled and said, "Lighter." Because that's how it felt. Not triumphant. Not smug, just lighter. I had dropped a weight I didn't know I'd been carrying for years. It was strange how one selfless act could clear out so much buried resentment. Not because it made things fair, they never were, but because it proved I didn't need to hold on to it anymore. That kind of peace, it's rare, and I wasn't about to waste it. A month passed, and one day I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, from my mother. It was 4 pages long. She talked about my childhood, how she remembered the time I stayed up all night fixing the furnace when Dad was out of town, how I was always the first to offer help, the last to ask for anything. She said she regretted not saying thank you more, not standing up for me more. By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking. It wasn't an apology, it was a confession. And honestly, that meant more. It meant she saw the script for what it was, and finally admitted she'd read it wrong. Later that week, I got another call, this time from Eric. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. He didn't start with small talk, just dove right in. "You know I didn't ask for all of it," he said. I replied, "But you didn't refuse it either." Silence. Then, "You're right." For the first time in our lives, there were no egos in the room, just two brothers, unraveling years of imbalance. We talked for an hour. Not about the will, not about money, but about us. And weirdly, for the first time, it felt like we were equals. He even asked to meet up. We grabbed lunch a week later. Nothing fancy, just burgers and sodas. And he said something I'll never forget. "You've always been the better man. I just never had the guts to admit it." I didn't know what to say. So I just smiled and said, "We're all just trying to figure it out." And that was enough. We laughed. We shared stories. And for the first time in forever, I wasn't looking at my brother with bitterness. I was just looking at him as family. Funny how things change when you stop chasing validation. Suddenly, the world feels more open. Opportunities came that I never saw before. I started volunteering at a local community center, mentoring teens who felt like the invisible ones in their families. I told them my story, not for sympathy, but to show that silence doesn't mean weakness, that you can speak volumes with your actions. And I watched them grow, saw their eyes light up. That impact, it became my reward, more than any inheritance could have ever offered. People think revenge has to be loud, explosive, theatrical. But the best kind? It's silent. It's choosing grace over grudge. It's mailing a paid-off deed instead of a bitter letter. It's showing the world you're bigger than the hurt they handed you. And when I think back to that envelope, plain, unmarked, but full of meaning, I realize now that was my mic drop. No audience needed. No applause required, just truth, delivered quietly, but heard forever. One day I got a message from a stranger. Apparently word had gotten around. "I heard what you did," it said. "You gave me hope." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about my family anymore. It was about every person who's ever been told they don't count, who's ever been left out of the story. I printed that message and pinned it above my desk. It became a reminder that our stories, no matter how quiet, carry echoes. Months passed. Holidays came and went, and for the first time in years, I was invited back to Christmas dinner. Not out of pity, not out of guilt, but because they wanted me there. I walked in and something felt different. The room wasn't louder, I was just no longer silent. I belonged. Not because they said so, but because I believed it now. I had rewritten my role. And this time, I wasn't the footnote. I was part of the chapter. They still talk about that envelope sometimes. Mom keeps the deed in a frame in her hallway now. Eric told me he looks at it whenever he needs to remember what humility looks like. I didn't set out to teach a lesson, but I guess the lesson taught itself. That kindness, even the quiet kind, leaves a mark. And sometimes, it's the unspoken things that speak the loudest. So that's my story. Not a tale of revenge, but of resolution. Of becoming the kind of man I always wanted to be, not for them, but for me. If you're listening to this and you feel overlooked, undervalued, or forgotten, know this: your worth isn't measured by who includes you. It's measured by how you rise when they don't. My name is Nathan Carter. They cut me out of the will, so I paid off the house, and I mailed them the deed, quietly, completely, and in the end, proudly.